Sun-drenched. Multiculturality.
Egalitarian.
Massive.
Oh, well, I would say the one word is peaceful.
Assimilation.
Dream.
Family.
Big. Big. Very big.
Lawnmowers.
Australia is a place that I always will return to, no matter where we go. We are travellers in the heart, but Australia is always home.
Australia, to me, is one of my two homes. I love Australia. I feel safe here. It's a beautiful place to be. The people are wonderful. And I think for like a lot of people, I moved here for love. And, but, I find that I've got one leg here and one leg back home. So it's one of my two homes.
Australia means freedom of speech, of thought, and religion, mostly.
Well, I guess every refugee in my situation would be saying the same thing. You have the freedom to do what you want to do, think what you want to think, and actually say what you think. So that's probably the first and foremost thing that I think about Australia. But then it is pretty much a very welcoming country. We think, I guess a lot of people hear, how refugees are being discriminated, or but I don't think it is. I think by and large the general population is very welcoming, and I haven't felt nothing but that by the majority of the interaction I've had since I've been here 37 years now. So that's one of the most important things that I've experienced. I guess the next thing would be a land of fairness. I think looking at other countries now, I've been back to Vietnam a few times, I can see that even though we have wealth in Australia, it's reasonably well distributed. The gaps between the have and have nots are not so large as people think it is. I mean, if you have areas where there is a bit more unemployment and all that, but by and large they get by fairly comfortably, and that also means that there's a lot of opportunities in Australia to give it a go. I think that's probably the most outstanding thing. There is opportunities if you want to make something out of it. You only get out what you put in, and that's the same as what I'm telling my year 12 son at the moment. I don't think it's sinking in, but
Australia is my new home, or my second home as I'd like to call it, because you never leave your past behind, you take it with you. And it means for me development, it means love, it means family. And particularly now it means good weather.
I think Australia is a wonderful country full of great opportunity, great potential, which is all too often held back, as Donald Horne observed 50 years ago, by the second-rate governments who run it.
The biggest adjustment I had to make was, of course, leaving my friends and family behind. Everyone would say so. Australia being quite isolated, very far away from my country of birth. And but for me personally, it was losing my job, really. So I used to work as a TV journalist, which is very bound to language, and my English isn't bad, or it wasn't bad back then, but the whole work culture is very different here. So for example, in Germany you would just have a written reference, so they're not used to being called by a future employer and to inquire about you. So that hurdle no one wanted to take, so they would naturally decide for a native-born Australian person to take up the job. So that was very hard to realize I can't work in my old profession.
When I came here, I was expecting it was going to be a pretty simple transition because the two societies looked very similar on first viewing, but in fact it was a lot harder than I expected it was going to be. There's quite profound cultural differences. The hardest thing was the humour, was getting my humour and my sense of humour in more in line with the way it works here. When I first arrived, I was constantly dropping little jokes in here and there throughout conversation, especially at work, and it was not appreciated because work is a serious place. You can't go around making jokes all the time, and in other conversations. Nowadays, so I learned to manage that to a degree. I think I've compromised. I've come to a compromise with Australia on that now.
I think having to adjust with being far from family. I would say that was the biggest thing. The rest of the things, having to kind of adjust with different accent of English. We hadn't learned English in Australian accent, obviously, that was one adjustment, or having to get our qualifications kind of recognised again here and do all the things. There were adjustments, but I think the biggest was that, I had to accept that we're going to live far from our family and not see them every week, but see them every year, if we're lucky.
The distances, it's a huge continent. I'm talking about Australia. Even the cities themselves, they have big roads and long distances. Even when you go, intend to do your shopping, you need to drive sometimes 20 minutes. So the place I moved from the UK, Leicester City, is a very cozy little city. So when I compare with the UK and Australia, it's like long distances you have. So we're still getting used to this. When I compare with Turkey and Australia, it's okay. When you compare with especially Istanbul, very cosmopolitan, 17 million people packed in one single city. There's always traffic jam, always horns and etc. So I prefer take long distances rather than being in Istanbul traffic.
Really no, only once. Someone in my very early years here called me a pom, but did so in a very derogatory manner. And I remember it vividly because it was like having a bucket of cold water thrown over me. I shook it off, it didn't matter because he was an idiot. But it really did. I got, for the one and only time in my life, an insight into what it feels like to have people treating you in a negative manner. But it's only happened once.
Yes, I have experienced discrimination in Australia. At school, I was called different names. I was also laughed at because of my name. They called me all sorts of names. And also, if at the park or anywhere, anyone who will help pass who is racist would make a remark which is inappropriate. I do try not to be upset by it, but it is very difficult because it's very, very personal.
What sort of things would they say?
They would say, they call me Ching Chong or a nip, which is quite funny because I'm not Japanese and I'm not Chinese. I'm actually Malaysian Chinese, but those people who are racist, they don't know that. They just judge. As soon as they see my face, they judge.
No, not yet is my answer. It's because I've experienced, unfortunately, many verbal attack, and when I was in Europe, I was stopped by the airports. It's because of only because of my scarf and my usual Muslim, appearance. So, but here, what happened so far is that I had very weird and bad-looking lookings in public. So I'm ready for a verbal attack if that happens. Luckily, I haven't had any. But so far it's going well here in this country, and I hope I haven't, have such problem.
I don't need to think a lot because it hasn't been I can't say there's been a few times or anything, but I could say one period of time when I was living in a different state than Victoria. I remember that the feeling that I had there in terms in the social community settings and also in the work professional settings. I remember the feeling that I was aware that I'm different from others. I remember that I kind of missed that sense of friendliness and kind of embracing of people in Victoria, because I started in Victoria for a couple of years and then I moved states. I moved interstate and came back again. So that's what I could say. I don't know if I call it discrimination, but I felt I was recognised differently.
Coming from Germany, I didn't really get discrimination. So just physically, I blend in with white Australia. So when I walk down the streets, no one would mistake me for being Asian or Middle Eastern. You don't cop that, what people have to put up with when they come from different backgrounds. I get a lot when I talk to people, don't mention the war, but it's of course meant in a funny, blokey way, which is fine. Discrimination, because my work. I lost my work because I'm not of an Australian background. I couldn't produce an Australian working record. That's what they were really after, and I find that is discrimination as well, but it's of course pretty subtle, isn't it? Yeah.
As a child, 11, 12, you would at school, they call you nips and slanty eyes and all those things. But I think it's water under the bridge. People at that age, you might feel a little bit offended, but you forget about it soon. Those same people who call you names and all those things soon becomes friends. Once they get to know you, I think it's the same as the previous question. Once they get to know you, that becomes a non-issue. once I have found though in everything I've done, there are always the initial resistance. I think people warmed up to you after a while. I remember my second day in the shop in Surrey Hills here, across the road where Anne's Pantry is now. We have a letter box or letter slips in the door where people put in letters and all those things. I remember the second day we found a unused shotgun shell put in the letter box. I don't know what it was designed to do, but I think I've seen worse than that, so it didn't bother me, and it still hasn't. And when you remember these things, it might have been a thin veil of discrimination, maybe, or people fear being taken over by Asians or things like that. No, I don't think it's that much of an issue anymore.
So far, I have not experienced any direct discrimination. However, in recent years, I've noticed that when I used to be working as a medical receptionist and I'd ring up patients, they would slam the phone on me, and I used to always wonder, but why? Until the penny dropped and I realized that perhaps it was my accent that put them off, because there were so many call centers, everyone's ringing, hassling people. I don't blame them for doing what they did, but it wasn't discrimination. It was, I think, just, annoyance. Other than that, no, I have not personally experienced any discrimination, no.
My first friend in Australia actually there were two people. There were two people that I knew in my class in my first school, and they were Dutch. That brought us together. We were called the Three Musketeers, and that was very nice. I was only at that school for a little less than 2 years. And after that we lost touch.
Jeff was our very first friend. I should say Jeff and Alan. Jeff was the CEO of a very small regional hospital in Victoria that we applied for a job, like to work there as GPs, and they reviewed our CVs and they said that they were interested in our CVs, and but their approach was, I think, really different and interesting. It wasn't just a job interview. They actually helped us. They drove us there to the regional area. They invited us for the weekend there, and they helped us to get to know the community. Going to their local kind of Sunday market that was beautiful, and getting to know people. It was just for us to know if we like to be there. The thing didn't happen in a way that we end up working there. We chose a different path, but we're still very good friends. We see each other at least a couple of times a year. Jeff was the one who told us what footy is. They had no idea of Aussie rules, in the honour of loyalty, I'm a Collingwood supporter still, and I will be.
Yeah, I was 11 at the time. I guess you were more concerned about schooling and picking up the language and all those things. So you have a group of friends where, people that you play around with. I haven't kept in contact with all those people, but that was 37 years ago. But when I went to high school, I have a friend, and he's from Laos. We have the same interest in sports. We all play badminton, and for the last 35 5 years, I say. I've known Chen, his name, and we've been playing badminton every week for the last 35 years. So, you know, we're fairly close. And so I say he's the friend that I sort of really first met when I came to Australia. So, yeah, we still see each other all the time, at least once a week.
Yes, that's sarcastic. Japanese people is so naive, so we tend to believe what you say, and we are not watching the situation much. So, for example, when I cook a dish and then the guest said, "Oh, that dish was terrible," even the dish was empty, I believe, "Oh, so sorry, I just cooked terribly." That's yeah.
The first time I got seriously confused in Australia was on my first visit. I'd only been here a day, and I was with Anne. I was up in Coburg staying with Anne, and I got a tram, and Anne said, "Yeah, just go into the city, get the tram back and everything." And that was all. Going in was fine. Coming back, I could see I was getting near my destination, but I could not for the life of me work out how to stop this damn thing. There was a long thing that looked like a flat fire hose, which looked like it would be something that you pulled, but when I pulled it, nothing seemed to happen. And I was absolutely quite seriously concerned that I might end up at the end of the tram line before I could actually get off the tram. I did work out later how to stop the tram. The second thing that I guess that puzzled me about life in Australia was compulsory voting, because in England, as in most countries, voting is a right, not a duty, and so you could exercise it or not as you choose, and that was the way I'd always seen it. So the idea that it was a duty, a social obligation, was quite new, and I thought it strange for quite a long time. I eventually realised it's actually very positive. I'm a big fan now, because what compulsory voting does is it engages young folk when they're coming up to being old enough to vote, to start thinking seriously about life and politics and what's happening in the world and their world and what they want to do about it. So in Australia you have a very engaged electorate, whereas in so many countries like Britain and America there are such huge pools of often young people particularly in the big cities, who feel completely disenfranchised because they're completely disconnected, because they just don't bother to vote, they can't see the relevance, and so their voices don't get heard.
Probably one of the things I found very confusing in Australia were the cuts of meats that you get at the butcher or, Woolies or Coles, what have you, because they are very different cuts from how a German butcher would, cut up their pigs and cows and what have you. So I especially remember a time when I thought I bought the right cut for a stew, but of course it wasn't, and it did the exact opposite of what I needed it to do. And ever since I got myself to learn about the right cuts for the right meal.
When I first came here, I used to go to the supermarket and buy whatever my husband had said to go buy for dinner. And one of the things he had sent me for was 500 grams of mince. So I'd gone. So this is what I found confusing. The U.S. refuses to go metric, so I grew up with Imperial. So I went to the supermarket, Woolies, and asked for 500 kilos of mince. And the butcher laughed at me and said, "Darling, I think you meant grams." And I said, "Is that what I mean?" And he says, "Yes." And I went, "Okay." So I've learned since then. But I do occasionally come out with kilos instead of grams, and I get myself into a little bit of a fix. But luckily your butchers are very nice here.
What I found confusing as an 8-year-old was that the kids at school had cake in their lunch boxes, and that was something we only had on special occasions, and maybe on a Sunday we'd have a piece of cake with a cup of tea. But I thought, oh, they must have had a birthday, but no, they had it in their lunchbox every day. Cake. Lucky things.
I'm not sure it was the first word I learned in Australian slang, but what stuck with me was onya. I just loved it because when I heard it for the first time, I thought someone is talking senselessly about an onion. So I love onya.
My first exposure to Australian slang would have come in England a long time ago, back in the late 60s, when Barry Humphries was producing a weekly cartoon for a little magazine called Private Eye about the life and adventures of Australian expat Barry Mackenzie. And that was full of all kinds of the most marvellous slang normally associated with bodily emissions of one sort or another, which was also great entertainment and one of the early things that the early charms that Australia showed why it would be such an attractive place to be.
Well, at my first school, the girls, it was a girls' school, the girls had great fun with me because my English was, well, virtually non-existent. I knew a bit of grammar, but I didn't know how to put a sentence together. And the first thing they taught me was swear words. So there was great hilarity when I repeated the swear words.
I guess if it's a saying more than a slang, no worries will be the things that I often say too now, but that's probably what it will be. No worries, I think is the saying that I love to pass it on to all my kids.
So when I first arrived, I do remember not seeing many brown faces, many Indians. When I used to go shopping or in a mall, and every time I'd see one, even if it was at a distance, I'd be like, a big smile on my face, and I'd be so happy. And now, over the years, you see all different kinds of people from different culture, and it is so fantastic to be able to see all different ethnicities, different cultures, people in different garments, different clothes in the shops. It's just, Australia's just changed so much. The restaurants, we've got multicultural restaurants that's added so much to Australians. Food all over the world has become Melbourne especially is a landmark for foods from all cultures. We've started celebrating our religion, our festivals in a public way now. Places like Fed Square, and so it has really. There's a lot. There's mosques coming up. There's temples. There's gurdwaras. There's, so it has changed in that sense. Different religions have got their emblems and their praise of their places of praise all over, and that is fantastic. Yeah.
Well, we arrived in 1955, so there have been vast changes politically, and we are surrounded by people from all nations, and we,
my family. We love that, and it's also become much busier. We grew up when we arrived from Holland. We spent many years in Tasmania, and then came to Melbourne in '71, which was a shock because it was so busy compared to Launceston. And we certainly love being in Melbourne, surrounded by so much beautiful food and diverse cultures. In 1988, when I first arrived, we arrived to Adelaide. People were really, really friendly. For example, if we walk past someone at a park who was walking a dog, they would say, "Good morning, good afternoon." I've travelled quite a bit since graduating from university. And when I was in the UK, I find that the Australians there even more friendly, and they're very hardworking, the Australians overseas. And they're also willing to try different things as well, and try to experience new things. And when I came back, now that's in Melbourne, I find that people are not as friendly. And also there's a shift as well, because the cultures here where we're living in now, they're mainly Orientals, and suddenly feeling like feeling like a minority, suddenly feeling like a majority, which is very odd. But feeling majority as in just in the face, but not culturally, I don't believe. The other thing that I found as well is Australia is very car culture. We seem to have to drive everywhere, which is a real shame, because that means our area does not thrive as much. Actually, it should, because people will just drive to a supermarket or somewhere rather than shop at the local shop. I find that even when I walk and cycle anywhere, I hardly see anyone, and if I do, it's the same ones who are walking the dog or just taking a morning exercise.
I think changes have been quite marked over the last almost 30 years that I've been here. Just in the way people live. When I came here, we lived here. We lived in Surrey Hills. We've always lived in Surrey Hills, and was not working for the first several years we were here. While first Zoe and then Tess were getting ready to go to school, and so she got to know a lot of people. She got involved. We got very involved with Chatham, and and at weekends I would be up at Chatham doing working bees. We met a lot of people. There was a lot of social life developing, and through Anne we met a lot of people in our local neighbourhood. Nowadays, I think the ridiculous level of house prices means that almost every young family, both parents are working, some often full time, just to pay the mortgage and or to pay the rent, and so they don't, I think, have the same opportunities to get involved in the schools, in the communities, and I think that is a shame, because that was really a lot of our friends now are friends we've made through primary school, through kindergarten and primary school. That's where our social base has come from. Australia has become probably a fair bit more prosperous, or certainly felt richer, in the time that since I've arrived. You can see so much more material prosperity, so many more roads, so many more cars on the road. I think that I just recently had a little penny drop when I was listening to the radio, someone talking about how they fled from Sudan to Uganda and how they were welcomed with open arms by the people in Uganda. And someone was contrasting that welcome with the sort of welcome that Australians tend to give, or at least Australian governments tend to give. And it occurred to me that people in countries like Uganda, like Lebanon, will open their arms to refugees because they know what it's like to be threatened, to be persecuted, to live in a life which is unsafe. Whereas I think in Australia, people know what it's like to be rich, and the only thing that can threaten being rich is someone else taking it away from you. And I think that is behind one of the thoughts that's behind some of the entrenched resistance to openness and generosity towards people who are really in desperate need.
I think by showing interest in their values, culture, their difference from, say, the mainstream, showing interest in that, getting to know that and recognise it to the best they can. I'm thinking I was welcomed by exactly, I think, that, and people showing interest in my kind of skills and background and diversity. I think that's the best thing, and just, you know, on a kind of a surface, like literally welcoming people, walking on the street and smiling at each other and saying hello, no matter how you look like and kind of what background you are from. I think that's the best way to welcome. Oh, visiting them and make them feel safe, and giving the message that they belong here and they'll be here next to them.
And another thing that I find is important to learn their name as well and learn how to say it properly. Because one thing that I found is people find it difficulty with my name and they want to change it. They ask me to anglicize it. And I think that's quite insulting because it was actually my parents who gave me my name, and why should I change it to suit a person who's not willing to learn my name?
The best welcome anyone can get is to be, firstly, to be welcomed, to be made to feel that they're accepted and they belong, to be accepted on their own merits and for the strengths that they have, and to be given opportunities, the same opportunities that we as Australians will take for granted. I think if we do that, we will get the best out of those who come, and we will find that our open and multicultural society gets richer and stronger.
Well, I would say the best way to welcome people to Australia is to show interest in other cultures, in stories, and maybe ask them to cook you a dish that they love to eat or like to cook at home for their family, and maybe ask them, do you need any help with some admin stuff, some paperwork that is scary. Yeah, just show interest.
Well, I think they can welcome them with open arms, speak to people and learn about their culture and tell them about yours, and yes, we don't have much of an opportunity around our own neighbourhood for people from very different cultures, but we certainly always try and make conversation with people when we meet them, and love it. We try our very best to make them feel good about being in a different country, which we love to.
Personally, I find just people nodding at you when they see you rather than ignoring you. I think by ignoring people, you say to them subtly that they're not important, or they just anyone that you don't want to know. So I think just saying hello, if they are your neighbours, just have a word over the fence or something like that. If you can, invite them over for something to eat or something to drink. I think that's probably the most important thing. Just simply acknowledging that people are there, and rather than just ignoring and going on do your own thing.
Long summertime and being near to the two beaches.
There are so many things I love about Australia, but what I love about this country is it gives everyone an opportunity in all walks of life, whether it is, and I'm talking about myself in this country at my age. I was able to go back to university and do a degree in my 50s, which I thought was really amazing. Australia also has a lot of love for sport, the passion, the fierce competitiveness that we have, and how we groom our sports people right from young age to as far as they want to go. It is just, we really care about giving people the opportunities to go wherever they want to in life.
Oh, I love the climate. One of the major things. The climate, it's warm. The winters are very mild. And it's one of the major things that I find I would never live in Europe again.
I love the space. I just feel like there's so much space around me. I feel like I can breathe. I love how I don't feel like I have to be on the defensive. I don't feel like someone's on top of me, or I don't feel quite as paranoid here. And I love the people. I think for the most part they're all really friendly, lovely, and kind of happy and innocent.
I love the openness of people, their curiosity. Sometimes you find quite confronting statements or questions, which I got used to. For example, they still ask me, where's your accent from? And I wouldn't dare asking people in Germany the same thing. If I noticed they came from overseas, I would probably say, yeah, what's your heritage? When did you move here? Or something a bit more subtle. But these days I'm pretty happy because I've got recently that I have an Irish accent. And before that, someone identified a slight Scottish accent. So I think I moved on from the German accent.
I love the great outdoors. My husband and I love to travel anywhere in Australia. My husband mainly the interior, but we both love the coast as well, and have lots of camping, holidays and adventures. Off we go with our ute and stay away for a while, and it's great. We love it.
Clean air, and we can drink the water from the tap. We're very lucky. And the other thing is Australia, you have the freedom to dress the way you want. You have your own religion that you don't have to worry about or get prosecuted for your own religion. And the way that people accept you for who you are.
I love the openness of society and the ability to talk to just about anybody. And I love the footy. I really love the footy. Footy is a wonderful, wonderful sport, most entertaining sport in the world.